In 1993, celebrated Hollywood director Steven Spielberg released his film Schindler's List. Schindler's List soon became a global success. It became maybe one of the most influential films about the Holocaust made in the second half of the 20th century. Up until today, Schindler's List is an important reference for the visual memory of the Holocaust. It became the prototype of a Holocaust movie because, in a very innovative way, Spielberg decided to integrate references to earlier films, to turn his film into a kind of intertextual net of Holocaust references that refer to historic photographs, that refer to other films, to very early films, like for example Wanda Jakubowska's The Last Etape, which nearly nobody knew at the time in the mid-1990s anymore, but also to important Hollywood films like Sophie's Choice and others, and also to refer to the canon, so to say, of earlier Holocaust films, for example, Alain René's Night and Fog, Claude Lanzmann's Shoah. This shot from the film is quite interesting in this regard. So we see here a scene from the Platzow camp, and we see the camp in Schindler's List from the perspective of Camp Commander Goeth. So his point of view. But you can see from the very, very few visual evidence we have from the Platzow camp that Spielberg used this historic photo in order to recreate the panorama and then, so to say, virtually integrate it into this shot of Goeth surveilling the camp. Similarly interesting is the use of this historic photograph by American photographer Margaret Burke White from Buchenwald in Spielberg's film. So we see here prisoners after liberation standing close to a fence, looking straight into the camera. And interestingly, in the scenes about the Platzow camp, Spielberg integrates a very, very, very similar scene. So we can even say that this is a reenactment of the historical photograph from Buchenwald. So here now we see a group of women standing close to the fence, but of course there are significant differences. For example, here on the left side, the German guard, female guard, that completes the setting. And thereby Schindler's List, so to say, met the exceptions of the audience. At the other hand, kind of completed the gaps in the cinematic archive of the Holocaust. Use strategies, also cinematic strategies, of creating the impression of authenticity by using black and white, by using a handheld camera that gives us the impression of embedded journalism, of being really in the events, but also by using more distant views, like for example Schindler standing on the hill watching the SS clearing the Krakow ghetto. And by doing so, Schindler's List really becomes in itself a kind of cinematic archive of the Holocaust.
I don't know the Holocaust in color. I wasn't around then, but I've seen documentaries on the Holocaust. And anybody who's seen any documentaries, they're all shot in black and white. It's my only reference point. And
You wanted this to feel real.
I wanted to feel real, and the only reference point we had, it was contextualized in black and white for anybody that watched a documentary on it.
And thereby the film is so interesting when we want to study the cinematic memory of the Holocaust. And when we really want to explore how these intertextual references are integrated into a narrative that changes our perception of the Holocaust from a catastrophe, from the history of mass murder and extermination, to a history of survival and a history of rescue.
Und dann, das war schon der zweite Tag, sah ich die Anschrift Malkinia. Dann ging es noch ein Stück weiter, der Zug.
In his film Shoah, Claude Lanzmann, on purpose, avoids any kind of historical references to footage, to historical images, to archive footage. And he only uses shots from the present landscapes and the voices of survivors.
Dort haben Kühe geweidet und den Jungen so gefragt, aber nur mit Gästen, ne, wo wir sind. Ne. Und der hat so eine komische Geste gemacht, so, am Hals.
It is not a coincidence that Lanzmann specifically at this point of the interview cuts from the moving train to Richard Glaser, because Richard Glaser with his hand makes this gesture of cutting a throat. And this shows that the interview is not only about the voice, giving voice to the memory of destruction, but also about the gestures and the body language that remembers the past.
Und jemand in dem Wagen hat gefragt.
Und jemand hat also nicht gefragt, nur Gästen hat gefragt mit Gästen, was da los ist. Und der hat eben diese Geste gemacht, das da.
Lanzmann was not in favor of Spielberg's experiment. He was a fierce critic of Schindler's List. Taking into consideration this criticism, it is even more interesting that Spielberg decided also to refer to Shoah and Lanzmann in Schindler's List. And he does this in a very specific way. He does this by referring to images that are actually not visible in Shoah, but that are only images evoked in the imagination of the viewers.
Have Sie jumped?
Yes. I don't like.
No, you don't. What do you like?
I like caviar.
So, one day on the fire. Oh yes, one day.
So in our case, we listen to Richard Glaser and we imagine him standing in the train, watching outside and seeing a Polish farmer making this gesture. So what Spielberg does, he translates an imagination into a concrete representation. So he's, so to say, fixing the archive by completing it with final images. So we see that he 3 times repeats this particular scene and thereby, so to say, uses also this reference from Shoah as an element of suspense before the women are arriving to Auschwitz. Spielberg also refers to Alain René's Night and Fog in Schindler's List. And he does this at a very crucial point of his film. It is the kind of miniature version of the whole plot of Schindler's List. When Oskar Schindler arrives at a train station, because he had recognized that his bookkeeper, Stern, was taken by the Germans and put on a deportation train. So he tries to rescue Stern. At this moment, he tries to do that because he needs him. But we learn, of course, that Schindler is able to help. And so we see here Stern as the representative of all the Jews from Schindler's List that will be rescued by Schindler. And there is a very important moment in this scene when the camera does not stay with two protagonists, but moves into a different direction.
I somehow left my work card at home. I tried to explain them. It was a mistake, but I'm sorry, I'm stupid.
What if I got here 5 minutes later? Then where would I be?
And here we learn that Schindler's List is not a film about the Holocaust, but that it is a film about an exception, a film about rescue. The Holocaust is what happens on the sidetrack, in the background, in the storehouses, where we see all the goods that were taken from the Jews. And it is even more interesting that this reference here is using night and fog as the kind of template for illustrating for integrating the Holocaust into Schindler's List.
It's correct. I didn't ask you about the list. I asked you your name.
Klaus Tauber.
Tauber.
Hauptführer? This gentleman thinks a mistake's been made.
My plant manager is somewhere on this train. Please put him on it to disrupt production, and the album is called Go On to No One.
Ist hier unsere List?
Yes, sir. Mixer hat Stern.
Well, the list is correct, sir. There's nothing I can do.
What is your name?
My name? My name is Kunda. Hauptscharführer, Kunda. What's yours?
Schindler. Schindler. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I think I can guarantee you you'll both be in southern Russia before the end of the month. Good day. Stern! Stern!
Stern! Itzhak, Stern!
Stern! Itzhak, Stern!
Stern! Itzhak, Stern!
Stern!
So,
Stern!
Ebbrecht. My apologies.
Stop the train!
Train clos, verrouillé.
Stop the train!
Entassement des déportés à 100 par wagon. Ni jour ni nuit, la faim, la soif, l'asphyxie, la folie. Un message tombe quelquefois ramassé. La mort fait son premier choix.
So, Schindler's List is not a film about the Holocaust. It's a film about rescue. It's a film about an exception.
Rien que des cheveux de femme. À 15 pfennigs le kilo, on en fait du tissu. avec les autres. Des engrais. Tout au moins, on essaie. Avec les corps, mais on ne peut plus rien dire.
And in this context, of course, it is very significant that Schindler's List became, so to say, the initial point for the foundation of the Shoah Foundation and its Visual History Archive, collecting testimonies from survivors and thereby gaining significant authority to the survivors for telling their stories and their experiences from the history of the Holocaust. And on the other hand, implicitly using the visual archive of the Holocaust and transforming it into cinematic memory of these events.